And we're back with Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from the ISFF Pop Culture Cosmos. We cover the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, also as well, the Lakers Fast Break. Truly appreciate everyone out there checking all of our good shows. And if you can, please give us that 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, if you can subscribe, do whatever you can to help us out here at the Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and of course, the Lakers Fast Break and Pop Culture Cosmos, where we're broadcasting on YouTube right now. And if you do, it is truly appreciated. But it wouldn't be an Inside Sports Fantasy Football without my good friend. Indeed, he is one of the two great Lardieri's behind the Domination Sports Nation. A guy back from vacation and looking, well, I can't see because he's behind a no camera thing, but I'm sure he's doing okay. It is my good friend indeed. It is Chris Sardieri. And Chris, great to have you here, my friend. Back, refreshed, ready to head into week 9 of the NFL.
Yeah, indeed. Great to be back, Gerald. North of the border, had a nice trip. Appreciated your tips. Can't go anywhere without football crossing my paths. We stayed right across the street from the home of the BC Lions of the CFL, so it was cool to see how they do it in Canada. A nice retractable roof stadium, but back in time to enjoy a wild week 8 of both football and fantasy.
I think it's probably your phone. The reason why, because he is using his phone, so it sucks up the battery power. I think when you use because in the past shows that you have before, I think it just sucks up the battery power. People are asking as far as why you're being so shy. Normally, he isn't that shy at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So my laptop's on the fritz, and then I'm trying to get a suitable workaround. So I hope to have something here soon. But you hit the nail on the head. Everything drains my battery, and the camera seems to do it too. I'm not in witness protection. I can assure you of that.
okay, good. Black Friday is around the corner, my friend. I'm gearing up for it. For something I could do to replace this old battle axe I got right here. And not talking about anything other than the computer, mind you. Yes, out there. Yes, because it's my 12-year-old computer seeing its darker days, and hopefully I get it simple replacement here too, and I hope you will as well, my friend. But we are here to talk not about our computer troubles. We're here to talk about week 9 in the NFL and what is trending heading into week 9 in the NFL for fantasy football owners, and also people who just like NFL in general, because it was a Hail Mary that was hailed by the Washington Commanders, and I actually watched the play live because they cut from my game to that game and they watched the ending. And I know that for a lot of people out there, it was one of the most exciting endings in quite some time. The gift, per se, of the Hail Mary. Jayden Daniels threw that ball for the Washington Commanders, and it was short. It was short, so it was up to the Chicago Bears defensive back to actually help that ball reach the wide receiver into the end zone, my friend.
Rule number 1 of Hail Marys for defensive backs: knock it down. And the Bears didn't follow it. Dom and I, same thing, got to see it live, went nuts, scared the heck out of my wife. I told him that's probably the best Hail Mary I've seen since Doug Flutie's. He had no idea what I was talking about and had to go look it up on YouTube. But just with the scrambling and the constant motion to set up to get that throw, I mean, unbelievable. We have Daniels in fantasy. I know he had a rough game up until that point, but even if you don't have him, you have to just really appreciate what he's been doing this year as a rookie.
And that's our main topic for today for fantasy football owners, whether you target him in trades or whether you have him starting for your team. Jayden Daniels, according to the stats right now, 161 points on ESPN's fantasy football scoring list. That puts him 5th. And for a guy that's only thrown 7 touchdowns and only run four touchdowns himself, it's amazing to see how far and how high he has progressed in fantasy football. So I will ask you again, not the most accurate, not the most touchdowns, but somehow he's getting points for his team and he's getting points for your team as well.
Yeah, and you got to remember too, he left the game early with being hurt, and he's still that high. It's all about the yards. He gets rushing yards when he doesn't score, and as we know, we've seen it in previous years with Hurts, for instance, and even Josh Allen. You get those yards, you get those rushing touchdowns. They count, they add up, and Jayden Daniels is definitely proof of that.
But with that said, my friend, do you or are you a believer in his success, his continued success going forward? He is this entire crop of young quarterbacks has a lot of mixed results. The latest being Richardson in Indianapolis getting benched because he can't even hit half his passes are not even
Hmm.
completed. So guess what? Going back to our old standby, Joe Flacco. So with that said, my friend, he the best of this young crop of quarterbacks that are out there?
Yeah, right now he is. And in a league we have Daniels. We drafted Richardson. I mean, quarterbacks were going. We figured, all right, we'll get Richardson. We'll get ourselves a backup. Now, when we said backup, Dom and I were thinking maybe we'll be lucky to get Goff or a Stafford or someone like that who's a pocket quarterback and get you some touchdowns and you can plug in if you need them. We managed to have Daniels fall to us. Thankfully, we did because Richardson got hurt and his season's imploded, and Daniels has completely exceeded expectations. So, uh, big caveat, he's got to stay healthy. He's already gotten dinged up once, but I think with a favorable schedule for Washington, the fact that this team's got momentum, and apparently he and OC Cliff Kingsbury seem to work well together, I think this trend can continue.
Really? Okay. Because again, when you look at the numbers overall, nothing really stands out. But the fact is that he is so steady. And I think that just leads to why the Washington Commanders overall on the season have been successful. I believe they're 6-2 on the season, if I'm not mistaken. They have found success in other ways outside of just having to be dependent on whether or not he is a top flight elite quarterback or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, one other kind of underappreciated aspect of the Commanders this year is their defense. I mean, they've really made a turnaround. We know Dan Quinn's a defensive coordinator by trade, did a good job with the Cowboys after losing his job as a head coach in Atlanta. And I think that helps too. And you've got a good defense, you're going to get the ball back, you're going to get more possessions, and that can only help Daniels on that side of the ball.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is it is Chris Lardieri along with Dominic Lardieri. They make up the Domination Sports Nation. It is me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much again for watching, listening. Let me ask you this. Some of the things that you saw over the course of last weekend in week 8 of the NFL, your Giants, man. Your
Oof.
Giants. Another tough loss where they snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory once again. What is going on there in New York, and is it even worth salvaging? I seems like I ask you this every year. We've been doing this, and we've been doing this now for 5 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, your thoughts, my friend? What is going wrong again in New York?
I mean, it was a winnable game. This is how bad it's gotten, Gerald, with the Yankees losing and going down 0-3 to the Dodgers Monday night. I put the Giants on, knowing what the outcome would be, and actually having a glimmer of hope as they had multiple shots late in the game to, at least tie it. And Daniel Jones does it again. And I think that's a big part of the problem. And look, he's an easy target, but the guy he's a turnover machine. He's not accurate. He can't handle the pressure. I know Brian Daboll is going to get some crap too, but with play calling and the like, and not having a kicker on hand earlier in the year, and they could have beaten the Commanders. But the guy's a mess. They've got some talent around him. Malik Neighbors has been phenomenal. Tracy looks like he's been a real find, as I believe was a 5th-round pick at running back. And Jones just kills any sort of rally. I mean, this is where stats can be misleading. You look at his completion percentage; it looks good. He doesn't get the most yards, but when push comes to shove and they need him to make a play to get a drive to score, not a field goal, he doesn't do it. He fumbled last night. I don't know who he was throwing to on the interception to end the game. And that's what happens with him. Part of me feels bad for him. Look, he's gotten beaten up. They've had a horrible team the past few years. No offensive line. I'm sure he's shell shocked. But 2 years ago, Dable made him look like an adequate quarterback, and he actually won a playoff game. I mean, at this point, what can you do? The other talk coming out there in media circles is that he's got some clause in his contract. If he's hurt next year, he still gets paid. And everyone in the football world knows that the Giants are probably going to cut bait with Daniel Jones. So now the rumors start. Do you bench Jones? You've got this contract clause in his contract looming. Not that Drew Lock's great. He's a serviceable backup, but do you let him play? Do you tank to try and get a quarterback? Last year, Tommy DeVito was this great story, but now looking back in hindsight, they won a couple of games with him and essentially lost out on having a shot at Jayden Daniels or Drake May.
What is the story with DeVito at this point in time?
DeVito showed up at the Yankee game tonight. That's about all I could tell you. He was at Instagram. He's still on the team. Funny, I was talking about this with my brother who still lives back there.
So he's on the taxi squad is what he is.
Yeah, I mean, he's there in case of an emergency. And he's really been quiet. My brother theorizes, the team probably told him, it was a nice little Chris Lynn style story. Linsanity style story. Jeremy Lin. I don't know why I said Chris. I'm thinking of myself, unfortunately. But
that's okay. I said Dom earlier, so that goes.
That's fine. You're halfway there. But he wonders too if the organization told him, all right, let's cool it with all this stuff. You had your 15 minutes of fame, but you hear nothing about him. His dad and his agent with the fedora are nowhere to be found.
So with that, my friend, what are some of the things that you were looking at, or what are some of the things that you want to talk about when it concerns coming out of NFL Week 8 are concerned? Obviously, the dominance of the Chiefs, another victory over the Raiders, ho-hum, in what was another visitors' home game, per se, because there was more red in the stadium. And people, my daughter didn't believe me when I talked to her about the Steelers, and I said, just take a look now. Take a look at the Taylor Swift Bowl that's going on in Las Vegas at the Allegiant Stadium. And sure enough, more red than black. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that they keep on parading this out there like it's Las Vegas's team. They're not. Las Vegas's team is in the NHL, and it sure as hell ain't the Raiders.
And it's not the A's either, but I digress.
You could digress all you want, my friend, but you hit it right on the head.
Yeah. So it's funny. Dom and I went to a college game in 21. I think it was the first week of the season. BYU played Arizona. Frankly, not an exciting game, but we wanted to see the stadium. And we were talking with one of the ushers, and he flat out told me, he said, tickets are too expensive. Yeah, you're going to get some of the hardcore Raider fans coming from the Bay Area and LA every week to go see their team, but there's going to be a lot of other tickets out there. And who's going to come? It's going to be the visiting team because, who doesn't want to go to Vegas on vacation? And you get to see your team play at a spanking new stadium. And so he was proven completely correct. No one wants to go at those prices. Plus the Raiders stink. So it just becomes essentially a home game for the visiting team, unless it's like the Chargers, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. That's the meandering, leading the meandering around. That's for sure. But what are some of the other things that you saw coming out of NFL Week 8?
So, but besides the fact that the Lions look like they're the leading juggernaut front runner in the NFC right now, Jared Goff is, frankly, got to be an MVP consideration. The two-headed machine at running back's impressive, but something stood out to me, kind of slipped below the radar because it was last Thursday night. The Rams got both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back, and lo and behold, separate of a questionable face mask call that wasn't called. I don't want to get into that. Apparently the ref didn't see it, but regardless, should be reviewable, and it's not Roger Goodell. But the fact that those two guys are back, Kyron Williams is chugging along at running back, and the Rams offense looks revitalized. And frankly, in an NFC West that's so up and down, I feel like anyone can win it. This Rams team looks like it can make a run. If not, I think it's good news for any of your Rams players, fantasy owners.
Last thing I'll touch on for this past weekend, my friend. Again, I mentioned that Jayden Daniels is probably the class. Him and C.J. Stroud would be the first two guys that come to mind as far as how well they have played for their respective teams. I don't want to slight CJ in the slightest because he has done an absolutely sensational job as well. But after those two, the young quarterbacks has been, like I said, a lot of hit, very little hit and a lot of miss.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Williams, I think, he was there. He's in that game. He's actually nothing pops out, but obviously he's done enough to get that team into a position where they've got a winning record and give Chicago fans some hope. But the guy that nobody is talking about right now is a guy that was slighted and laughed at in week 1 and week 2, the NFL. He is now possibly having the last laugh in Denver in Bo Nix.
Yeah, absolutely. I was perusing waivers tonight with Richardson on our bench. Dom and I were considering our options. And not only is Nix available in both leagues, but fantasy wise, he's doing pretty darn well. I think in one league where I saw he was out there, he's got more fantasy points than Kirk Cousins. You say, how could that be? Well, Cousins will have some huge games and he'll have some games where he doesn't. But Nix has been quietly consistent. And, people in the NFL world laughed at that pick. They thought Sean Payton reached and took him too high, but he's not doing bad. And, as he matures and gets more reps, you could potentially see him in the second half of the season being worthy of not only being on your fantasy bench, but potentially a spot start. I mean, dare I say he's got some Joe Flacco type tendencies where he could come out of nowhere in the second half?
Possibly, my friend. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure noted because he's the one name when you look at the top of the scoring leaders in fantasy football. He's the one name that has started rising and rising. It started at a very low point, my friend, but it started rising and rising and rising to the point where, you know what? He is not a bad choice right now.
Not at all. With the way that Denver defense plays, that's going to keep them in games. And again, I'll hit this theme again. You wouldn't know it by looking at him, or just kind of thinking of his days in college. But Bo Nix will get you some rushing yards too. And as a guy who's got Javonte Williams on his team, that can frustrate the heck out of you at times. But if he's your quarterback, he can get you some of those proverbial cheap points by running.
Absolutely, indeed. But once again, it is Chris Sardieri from the Domination Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much again for watching, listening. Truly appreciate it. So with that, my friend, I wanted to ask you about what's coming up for NFL Week 9, coming up here right around the corner. Your thoughts before we get into some real good picks out there, and also as well, woof, 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 another trip to the doghouse. Your thoughts on some of the more interesting things you'd like to check out this weekend in NFL Week 9, barring, of course, the World Series has already been completed.
Yeah, two games stick out to me. I mean, naturally, I think the marquee game of the week, the Lions at the Packers for NFC North supremacy. Hoping Jordan Love plays just so we could see, ideally, a nice back and forth offensive shootout. And then, too, the Rams go up to Seattle. Seattle's really licking their wounds. The Bills put the smackdown on them. I think all your concerns about Josh Allen have been alleviated for the time being, Gerald. But with the way the Rams are playing, they've been known to go into Seattle and win. I think whoever wins this game will kind of pull away from the other and looking to contend with the 49ers for the division title. So that's another matchup that interests me. And given the way the Seattle defense is playing, I think that's going to bode well for Rams offensive starters.
Absolutely. So with that, my friend, it is, of course, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. If you have ever any questions out there, please go ahead and hit us up, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, or in the comments below, right there for you, or just send it over to me on Lakers Fast Break or Pop Culture Cosmos, and I'll go ahead and I'll pass along to Chris to get your fantasy football questions answered ASAP. So with that, my friend, wanted to go ahead and hear your thoughts on Week 9. First off, just a general pick or picks that you think are going to come true, or things that for entertainment purposes only you are seeing trending as far as the odds for some games or a game in Week 9.
So in looking at the lines prepping for the doghouse, I noticed this Jets-Texans game has just oscillated back and forth. First, the Jets opened as favorites, then it moved to the Texans. And now today with the news that Stephon Diggs is out for the season and the Texans already without Nico Collins. The Texans are now a 2-point underdog in the Meadowlands against the Jets on Thursday night. I mean, my conventional wisdom tells me, despite the Texans' injuries and their struggles on the road this year, I watch enough Jets games. I don't know how they're going to score in that Houston defense. So, I mean, that right there looks like a gift to me and was one of the games I was leaning towards picking.
There you go, my friend. So some interesting things are happening right now. NFL Week 9. Again, outside of the Detroits, the Kansas Cities, things seem to be pretty up in the air with a lot of teams right now. So with that, my friend, and all that still up for grabs as far as what's going on competing in the NFL for this weekend. A lot of games up for grabs. So with that, my friend, I want to ask you this. When you head out on the ground, when you head out there, it actually was nice today. Under 70 degrees here in Las Vegas. I could tell you along the grounds, it was really nice heading out there, taking a walk, walking by, and I take a look at my neighbor's house. Everything looks great. It's got the Halloween decorations up for a couple days from now for Halloween. But to the left, there's just a few little decorations right there for the dog because even the dog needs some decorations for the woof woof woof, the doghouse, my friend. So what have you got this weekend in the NFL?
What I've got, Gerald, is two of my favorite things: a home dog and a home dog getting 3.5 points, and that's the Green Bay Packers. And I'm sure this line's skewed because of the uncertainty with Jordan Love, yet another leg injury with him. I think that if you get that line now, it's presuming that Love is going to play, maybe not be 100%. But I will say if Malik Willis plays, that line will probably move substantially. But let's just go with the assumption that Love's playing. I like it. I think these two teams always play each other tough. The Packers seem to beat the Lions when no one least expects it, like they did last Thanksgiving. So I'm going to pick the Packers getting the points at home. I know their defense has kind of been up and down this year, and the Lions have one of the best offenses in the NFL. But with these division rivalries, especially in the North, anything can happen. And I think the Packers could have a lot of weapons on offense. You saw Josh Jacobs have a great game down in Jacksonville this past Sunday. So it wouldn't shock me at all, even if the Packers went outright. But I always like that extra half-point cushion. Brandon McManus, for all his controversy, has kicked 2 game winners in consecutive weeks. So no issues with kicking in Green Bay.
I want to go ahead and say also as well, there's a game that I have some interest in, and that's the Rams and the Seahawks. I know the Rams, after their victory over the Vikings, the Rams are back. They've got their wide receivers back. Everything's looking good for Matthew Stafford. Everything's going all right. Let's see what they do against the 13th man. Let's see what they do up in the Pacific Northwest. Because right now, bettors, they think they've got the momentum when it comes to the Rams. I am not so sure. I think it's still an iffy bet for the Rams, especially up in the Pacific Northwest. I think this is the week we can finally figure out what the Rams truly are. If they are an afterthought or if they are a team that's going to be considered a contender in as far as the NFC conference. So if that's the case, my friend, I'm going to go with the Seahawks, and I'm going to go ahead and say who are the underdog right now. It's only 2 points, my friend, and it could sway by the time kickoff happens. But I'm going to go with Seahawks at home, the dog for Doghouse today, my friend.
I don't blame you. The Seahawks are going to turn around one of these weeks. I just don't know when.
I just think they've got a good running game that they can go ahead and if they can establish that running game with Kenneth Walker, I think they can really get that thing going. Geno Smith, is Geno Smith actually going to go ahead and get back to the level that he did in his first surprise year in Seattle? I'm just going to go ahead right now and I would say at home, if Seattle's got anything left, it's going to be this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I've got Kenneth Walker on one team, so I hope you're right in that aspect.
So with that, my friend, it is, of course, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Looking forward to another great weekend of NFL action. But my friend, before we head on out, you have got to give us the lowdown of what's going on with you and Dom at the Domination Sports Nation.
Well, Dom requested we push back this week's episode to see what transpired in the Bronx tonight. The Yankees win to keep a glimmer of hope alive. So our show will either be talking about the Dodgers World Series championships or the Yankees forcing the Dodgers back to LA for a game 6. So we shall see what transpires there. We'll talk about the pathetic Giants, some interesting things transpiring in college football. It looks like Texas A&M is kind of come out of nowhere as a team that's climbing. And then there's a huge game between Ohio State and Penn State in Happy Valley this coming Saturday, which has ranking and playoff implications. And then, too, speaking of college, Dom went to his first Rutgers game. That's my alma mater. It's also his first game at the LA Coliseum. We went there Friday night with my friend who's actually an alum, got his PhD at USC. He sat in the Rutgers section with us. A nice turnout in the Rutgers sections there at the Coliseum. And my friend, the SC alum, behaved himself, which is nice. But I think not putting words in Dom's mouth, but these were pretty much his quote. This stadium's old. So, you got to see a lot of history. We saw the plaque for the original 32 Olympics, saw the torch, did a whole lap of the stadium just to check it out. But I will say BMO Stadium, which is adjacent to it, I've never seen it, heard good things about it. Looks really nice. But Rutgers is pretty pathetic. They started off nice 4-0, but as I put it to Dom, they tackle like the Giants defense, and they were no match for the Trojans after the third quarter. So a few of the things we'll be talking on this week's episode.
Thing is, though, you actually suffered through some of the worst LA sports traffic on any day known in Los Angeles history the other day. That's
gotta hand it to my friend Ed. So we knew the Dodger traffic would be bad early. We knew there was a Lakers game. We decided to eat out here at In-N-Out, the goat of burger joints in LA, and left about 5:45 and made it to the parking structure at 6:50. Those of you that don't live in LA still think that sounds horrendous, but on a Friday with all that going on, a traffic nightmare, pretty darn good. We were happy with that because my wife and I took Dom and his buddy to a concert at Crypto on a Saturday the week before. It took us an hour and a half. So, in the grand scheme of things, our traffic time was not bad. It could have been worse.
Could have been a lot worse because I saw actually aerial shots of it during that time, during that process, especially when you had a high school football game at SoFi Stadium, the college football game going on a little bit later. You also had a concert at the new Intuit Dome, aka the Toilet Bowl, as we call it here on the channel. Then you also had Dodger Stadium at Chavez Ravine. So the 110, it is my old saying, Chris, the 110 parking lot to the 101 going nowhere.
I did that commute for numerous years from Pasadena to downtown LA. So
as did I did it to going to Hollywood for over a year. So I know how much that a pain that was back then, and I'm sure it's an even bigger pain now.
Yeah, as I told my wife, this would be a county highway in New Jersey, but yet it's a freeway in LA. So I think it's the OG. It's the oldest, right, in LA, the 110.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, as I call it, the Harbor Sleepway, because I've fallen asleep on it on more than one occasion because I haven't been able to go anywhere. Sometimes you go down, you get near, let's say, what is the Crypt, or you get near, Memorial Stadium, Memorial Coliseum. Excuse me, it's going nowhere. I went there, tried to go to USC for a little bit, then I went there going to Hollywood. Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah,
absolutely rough.
The only pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is when the 110 ends in Pasadena. It turns into Arroyo, and you drive a little ways, and there is a great burger joint called Lucky Boy on your right with in my opinion, the best breakfast burritos in LA. It was my last meal as a single man before I got married, and I've got family on the East Coast who still talks about it. It gets written up a lot. So there's my culinary recommendation for this week.
I'm going to have to try that and match it up against the burritos at Lucha Libre in San Diego and the breakfast burrito here in town at Roberto's Taco Shop. So that would be a matchup made in heaven indeed. But once again, it is, I'm getting hungry too. Inside Sports Fantasy Football, Truly appreciate you stopping by. If you have any questions for us, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com. For those wanting to watch Lakers Fast Break, I may come back with an episode later tonight. It's up to Joe if he's not crying too hard in Temecula right now, or Jamie Sweet says he may be available as well. So we may do something later tonight. But until then, until tomorrow as well for Lakers Fast Break, I will be back anyways because Cleveland and the Lakers start off at 4 p.m. So with that, it is, of course, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Good luck this weekend with all your picks, with all your teams, and with everything that you need to do in NFL Week 8 from all of us right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.